fonts thing, we actually live in really interesting times right now. CSS3 is coming around, and font face is finally supported by pretty much all the browsers. Why is it not letting me advance? There we go. Pretty much all the browsers, and surprisingly, Internet Explorer is maybe the one that supported it first, with their own proprietary, obviously, format. But pretty much all modern browsers support it now. You can use custom fonts in your website. You're no longer limited to like the 8 fonts that Microsoft released to the web in the 90s called the Microsoft Core fonts, like Arial, Helvetic, Georgia, Verdana. There's like a bunch of others in Comic Sans. So you don't need to use those like 8 fonts anymore, the ones that have been used to death on the web. You can use custom fonts now, and it's actually fairly easy. There's 2 ways to do it nowadays. You can go hosted. There's a bunch of companies. I know Typekit. I know there's a couple others. I imagine this is a space that we'll see some competition. Typekit is basically hosted fonts. They've done deals with the foundries, the design shops that make fonts, to license those fonts to serve up to you using what's called font face embedding, where they can actually serve up the font like you'd serve up an image, and your browser will know what to do with it, and you'll tell your browser to style this block of text using that font that you loaded, and it'll happen. So Typekit is awesome because they've got a large menu of really great fonts from all these foundries. But you don't have to go that way. You can go with Font Squirrel. I think is probably the best site on the internet for finding high quality, usually, typefaces. And they have this font face generator, which is basically you can download like a kit with CSS and the fonts in all of the various formats you need to have them in order to serve it up. It's like you drop it into your website and bam, you've got fonts. And again, 2 to 3 max. Don't like go too crazy because it'll make your site ugly. But yeah, Font Squirrel. And now Google has kind of jumped into this game as well. They did a deal with Typekit. They released a bunch of fonts. My personal opinion is that the fonts they chose are horrible. But Google is getting into this space. They're going to serve up using their awesome CDN a bunch of these fonts. They'll load really quick. And because it's Google CDN, you'll enjoy the benefits of caching. Everybody will have these fonts somewhere in their cache. So you can use fonts, and it's a nice way to set your site apart from other sites. There were previous solutions. They generally suck. They're all superseded. I'm not really even going to talk about them. There was one solution using Flash, one solution using Canvas. They're both kind of obsoleted now. The support is still like in flux. In reality, it's not all perfect and roses and everything. You still need to serve up 4 different formats of fonts to be guaranteed that it'll actually show up on all platforms. And even then, on mobile devices, on the iPhone it works. I'm not sure about Android. Different WebKit browsers actually have very different support for web fonts on mobile. But this will get better. And it's really okay to start using it today because the beauty of CSS and font face is that it falls back to the next thing in the list. So you define a stack and you say, I'd like to use this beautiful font, but if you can't use this beautiful font, then fall back to the standard one. And so it'll just look, okay, but it degrades gracefully. So, yeah. Color. We've talked about structure. We've talked about type. Choosing a good color scheme. Color is actually pretty hard. It's a lot more voodoo than all the other things where there's like clear rules. There's still some rules. It's a lot of math, and it's a lot like music theory, where there's these relationships between different parts of the scale that inherently sound good to us. Like the pentatonic scale is universal across cultures or something like that. There's the same thing with color. There's color schemes that everybody seems to find attractive, or ways of going about picking colors that everybody seems to find relatively attractive. But you still run into problems with localization. Color doesn't mean the same thing to different people in different countries. The most widely cited example is white. Most of us in the West, we see white, we think, purity, simplicity, cleanliness. People in the East, it's death, because that's how they bury their dead. It's white is the color of mourning. So you have to be careful. What works for one person might not work for your users somewhere else. And so color is probably one of those things where you want to consult with somebody who really knows before you choose. But here's just like, a little bit of the basics so that when they, say something to you, you'll be like, oh, okay, I get that. Here's a color wheel. I'm talking about the additive primaries, RGB, which when you add them together make white. There's also subtractive primaries, which doesn't matter to us because that's print, and we're working with screens that emit light. These are the additive secondaries. And on these, on the color wheel, you can pick these color schemes. They've got like a whole bunch of names. Monochromatic, it's when you go with one color scheme and basically draw a line from the edge of the circle down to the middle. I think We Are Hundred was like just magenta. And there's a whole lot of sites that do this to good effect. This is a great one to use. If you don't know what to do, just go with one color. One color in gray, one color in black, one color in white. And you'll be okay. It actually is kind of a surefire recipe for success. Analogous, if you want to get a little bit trickier, basically pick 3 colors along the edge of the wheel or whatever. It can be also further in, it doesn't matter, but it needs to have that kind of ratio. Imagine if you slice this up like a pizza and there's like 8 wedges or 9 wedges, pick 3 wedges that are next to each other. Complementary, this is the color scheme with the most contrast, and you see this all the time, actually. Sports teams, a lot of them do complementary colors on their uniforms because it's the most contrast, it's the maximum contrast. Christmas, red and green, right? Not entirely complementary, but pretty close. Python, not a mistake, the designer who chose these colors. The EU, even though the colors rendered on the screen are awful, it's like, really blue on my iPhone, but yeah. You can get fancier and do things that are called like split complementary, and I know that when you look at like the, the 3 colors on the side in isolation, it looks kind of crap, but when you go and look at websites, pick out the colors that they use and just like, put them aside in like Photoshop or Paint or whatever. And you'll notice that they actually boil down to these kinds of color schemes. So you've got split complementaries when you choose like the 2 wedges adjacent to the one that's across from your first wedge. You can get even fancier with things like tetrads. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. There's 2 sites way in the beginning, which I guess I should have put at the... There's 2 sites, Color Lovers and color.adobe.com. These actually have online color schemes like libraries and libraries of color schemes. So you can go there and type things like ocean or tranquil or happy or loud or whatever adjectives, and you'll get back a whole bunch of color schemes that people have tagged that way. Not all of them are good, some of them are crap. But look through them and you'll see color schemes and you'll see which ones got rated up. And the ratings are actually kind of useful. Right. So that's color in a nutshell. So kind of covered all the greatest hits of things that suck about people who say that they don't do designs, interfaces, even though you can really learn this stuff and it's good. Steal and learn. Everybody learns by stealing. You learn by reading other people's code. You'd learn by looking at other people's design and using it and working with it. There's really a lot less of a distinction between design and code than you'd think. A great site to steal from, PatternTap. Again, a library of, like I said, my inspiration folder, screenshots of just like little elements of website. This is a website of that, but with ratings and votes and I don't know, and split up into categories like I want to see just headers or just navs, just thumbnails. And so it's a great resource to go to be like, okay, how did they do that? You can actually look and see how people did it. There's a whole bunch of sites that are like, 25 fresh designs of whatever sites, Smashing Magazine, Web Design Ledger. There's 8,000 sites like these. They have a bazillion Google ads on either side because that's what they make money from. But it's still useful. There's a great book which used to cost money, is now free online. Not that I make any money off this at all, but it's called Designing for the Web by Mark Bolton, and he's a UK designer. He's famous, I guess. Yeah, so that book basically covers everything that was in this talk and a whole lot more, and it's really well written, and there's a whole lot of tips about how to